Ai, ai. Nem acredito que hoje chegou, mano, depois de 6 anos e meio. Tava agoniado, ó, mano. Depressão, mano. Pô, não, é só 4. 4 uma hora. 6 anos e meio. Não, foi porque eu ganhei 1 ano por causa da pandemia. Mas normal é 5 anos e meio. É, mas quem pegou a pandemia ali aí ganhou 1 ano. Valeu. Valeu, Falcão. Vou precisar, viu?
Vai nada. Quem é a banca, Serafim?
Diverge, mas ele teve um problema com o voo, não conseguiu vir. Ele vai ficar remoto. Aí tem o Weber, o professor Lincoln e o Vitucci. Professor Vitor. Pra mim não chamar, fazer que nem a Malu, eu chamo ele de Vitucci. A Malu, obrigado, Vitucci, pelas considerações. Aí, ó, começou. Foi mal. E aí, professor? Vou mais, só mais uns 2 cafés para conseguir sustentar, né?
Então foi você que chegou cedo também.
Já tô cafeinado aqui desde manhã. Acordei, dei um pulo na cama. Ixi, é hoje.
É hoje.
thesis presentation. Defense.
Perfect. Serafim, can you do one thing? Can you remove the blurred background?
Oh, sure.
That actually makes it easier on the video too.
Let me see.
Good.
Nobody has a printed version of it. Nobody. Can you
Sure. Let me
put the
the presentation.
so I know the title of the thesis.
It's right here.
Already online? Okay, thank you.
Just a second. I will share my screen with.
How many years you work with us?
Now it's been 13, 14.
And he's also a researcher at LSBD, and he's a professor at the university, but he's not in our PhD program. He's also in the jury of Serafim. But Victor has also worked with Jivesh and myself. He spent some time in New York with Jivesh at AT&T, and we were together for a couple of months, right? Yeah. Working on
For about 5 years.
So, Serafim, Jivesh, want to say some words before Serafim starts?
Sure, just a few words, First, thank you, Joe, for inviting me to collaborate with you and your excellent students over the years. It's been a pleasure. And Serafim has been a wonderful student, wonderful collaborator. So I'm looking forward to seeing his PhD defense presentation.
Thank you. Serafim, you have around 45 minutes, and then we anyone, and then we have the question phase.
All right. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks everyone for coming. I'd like to, before I start, just thank the examination board for reviewing my work, taking the time. I really do appreciate it. So the goal here is to defend my thesis, which is titled Answering Differentially Private Multidimensional Queries. Okay. Let me just. Okay, so I think I'm gonna have. Okay, there you go. So just the outline here before we start. I'm gonna do the introduction, just present the motivate the problem and talk about the background that we need to understand before we dive into the approach itself. We're gonna talk about the related work, then formalize the problem. Gonna present the approaches, which there are 3 different assumptions, and we'll see the experiments, and then we conclude the work. All right, so organizations, they need to collect data in order to improve their applications, to guide decision making, right? However, they better do that, in a private manner, in a manner that protect users' privacy, right? Since data is always, subject of attacks and leaks and everything like that, right? So data, any data analysis typically is composed of multidimensional data, like this one here, right? And one of the first challenges when dealing with multidimensional data is to capture correlations, right? So attributes, this is a sample of the lone data set, which is the data set that is frequently used in the literature. We can see here there's a group of 4 attributes that are strong correlated here, and another group of 3, and the other ones they are independent, right? So it's really important for us to have, in order to optimize utility, to capture these correlations, right? If we materialize each dimension separately, we'll break the correlation, and this will result in lower utility. Okay, so this is the first challenge. The second challenge when dealing with multidimensional data is avoid the curse of dimensionality, right? So in privacy data analysis that is private, the number of materialized data points, as the number of materialized data points increases, estimation accuracy diminishes, right? So we gotta find a way to overcome this issue too. So if we ask 1,000 people the simple question, do you like pizza? And the answer is only yes or no. We can get a pretty accurate result. However, if we ask about 100 different foods, right, there will be a lot of combinations, 2 to the power of 100 like and dislike patterns. So that's a lot, to collect, and we need to find a way to minimize this, to overcome this challenge, right? Okay, just there's a little delay. Third challenge is when dealing with multidimensional data sets, there are some dimensions that are more queried than others. So they are more important, right? They are involved in more queries. So when collecting them in a private manner, we have to allocate more resources, in this case privacy budget, to those dimensions that are more queried, so we have more so we optimize the utility, right? So this is a challenge too, how we can incorporate workload characteristics to guide a smart data collection, a private data collection and analysis. And the fourth challenge is users may have different privacy requirements. So there are some users that trust the aggregator as central curator with their raw data, right? I'll show here a picture in a bit. But there are some other users that do not trust, right? So this is an example of the different privacy policies here in the US. They're in the US, right? So darker blue means a stronger privacy requirements. So we need to deal with that too. Okay. Now our problem is to answer frequency queries over multidimensional data sets. So this is a count query here, just an example. And if you run this count query on this data set here, you get the answer of 2. So this is basically the types of queries you will be answering here. Okay. Now, our main hypothesis. So our main hypothesis, by using grids to encode combinations of attributes, by mapping multidimensional data points to grid cells, it is possible to capture correlation and answer differential private count queries. Okay. Now, to guide more specifically our research, we defined 3 questions. More specifically, the first one is how we can answer an unbounded number of queries with range and point constraints when the entire population is composed of LDP users. I'll explain in a little bit what LDP users mean, but are basically users that do not trust a central curator. The second question we will answer is, given a population of DP and LDP users, that is a group of users that trust and the second do not trust the central aggregator, and some prior knowledge about the workload, how can we answer an unbounded number of differentially private range queries? And the third one, given a population of, again, with users with heterogeneous privacy requirements and a fixed number of queries, what's the best way to answer that fixed number of queries? Considering that we can estimate those queries using DP and LDP. But before that, before showing our approach, let's talk about the background. I already mentioned central DP, right? So differential privacy is a mathematical model that models user privacy and quantifies the level of privacy. So differential privacy has been proposed in 2006, rather. And initially, we had the central differential privacy model. Here, we have some data owners right here, and they trust a central curator and with their raw data, right? So their raw data is stored in a trusted curator here. Now the analysts, they're on top here, and they want to ask queries, right? And this query is answered by adding noise to the result. And the result of that is a noisy answer that satisfies central differential privacy definition, which I'll show in the next slide. Now, if we contrast here with the local differential privacy model, right, the data owners, they do not trust the central curator here, right? So they only agree to share a noisy version of their data. So they add noise locally before the information leaves their devices, right? So the untrusted aggregate curator here holds noisy data. Now, the good thing about this approach is that analysts can ask an unbounded number of queries, right, since the data is already noisy. Now, on the left here, each query, the analyst, one of the scenarios is that the analyst when they want to answer queries, each query consumes a portion of the privacy budget, right? The privacy budget is a number, we call it epsilon here, which is limited, right? So you must plan very carefully, the queries you want to answer, because you don't want it to run out, right? When the privacy budget runs out, you have you cannot ask any more queries. So differential privacy, an algorithm satisfies epsilon differential privacy for any two data sets, D1 and D2, if they differ only one tuple, right? And so you have this expression here, which basically means that whether or not you're in the data set, the output of the differential private algorithm doesn't change much. So you can't notice if the user is in the data set or not, right? The epsilon here, which is this little guy here, the higher the epsilon, the stronger will be the utility. However, the lower is the privacy, right? So with a small epsilon, the higher is the privacy, but the utility is diminished, right? So there is this trade-off, okay? Now, if we go to the local differential privacy definition, we see that there is no neighboring data sets anymore. Now, as the user perturbs its own data locally, right? So the user has a value V that will utilize the psi algorithm here, that this algorithm satisfies epsilon differential privacy, right? And V prime here is basically two values, any two values in the domain of the data. So suppose you want to collect, you know, the age dimension, right? The age of people. So you grab the true value V could be like age 35, and any V prime, the V prime here could be any other value in the domain of age. Let's say age go from 0 to 120, so it will be any other value. So you do not know, the intuition is that the output of a local differential private algorithm, you do not know if the user is answering the V or just lying with a V prime, right? Okay. Now, when you talk about local differential privacy, there's frequency oracles that help us to calculate frequency of data, you know, within the domain. So again, this protocol here has two algorithms. One is used locally by each user, which has a private value V, and we use this algorithm and we'll output the V prime here, which is a noisy version, right, of their data, and they will send this noisy version to the aggregator. And the aggregator, you use the phi algorithm to estimate the frequency of any value V, right? So the aggregator can estimate, you know, how many users have age equals to 35, for instance. Okay. Now, these frequency oracle protocols, we propose to use two that's in combination. That's what I'll present to you here. The first one is generalized randomized response, and this strategy perturbs the value according to these probabilities here. But the important thing to note is actually this expression here. This D is the domain of the data, right? If this D grows, the error of the estimation will grow too. So that there is that catch. However, this protocol will be very nice if this D is small, right? Now, in the case that the domain is big, is large, we can use this other protocol. We propose to use this other protocol here, which is called optimized local hashing. And this, if we see the expression of the expected error, we see that there is no D, right? So here we see the epsilon, we see the number of users participating, but this is for large domains. We're gonna use this protocol here. Okay, now let's talk about the related work or main baselines. There are three, which I show here, with different characteristics, right? The first one is HIO. It was published in Sigmod, and there's there's a few limitations with this work. We see here it does not avoid the curse of dimensionality, which we talked about earlier. It do not deal very well with large domains, but it captures correlations. That's nice, and it uses multidimensional levels in the case of the hierarchical domain decomposition, and do not optimize the user distribution and answer an unlimited number of queries, right? Second, here is HDG, which has been published in PVLDB. So it improves, you know, it has better characteristics than HIO, but they capture all pairwise correlations. That is, if the data set has, say a lot of attributes, it's going to capture all possible combination of 2 attributes. So that's a lot of information to capture. Remember that the more information that we need to materialize, the utility gets diminished, right? So keep that in mind. That's an important thing. PrivNud, it's another strategy. It's more recent, being published in ICDE, and avoids the curse of dimensionality, deal with large domains, and answering about the number of queries. However, it still relies on all pairwise correlations, and do not use the optimize the user distribution. This is an important point. It's one of the challenges I mentioned, where some dimensions are more important than others, right? So they assume that every dimension has the same importance, is frequently and equally queried, right? So we propose 3 strategies: Philip, PrivMDC, and DPAE. They all avoid the curse of dimensionality, deal with large domains. Philip here, assumes that every attribute is correlated. We solve that issue in PrivMDC, right? And the PrivMDC and Philip, they work for unlimited number of queries, and optimize the user distribution, as well as DPAE here. But DPAE is focused on a limited number of queries, right? So I will explain how they work now. Let's start with Philip approach. So here we want to tackle the problem of answering an unbounded number of queries. And the queries here may have point and range constraints, okay? And here we also assume that all users are LDP users, so they do not trust the aggregator, the central curator, right? So here we developed 2 approaches. We propose 2 grid algorithms construction. So to capture multidimensional data sets, we propose to use grids, right? And these grids, they combine different attributes in the data set, right? So if we combine them too, we can capture correlation because we are mapping, right, these attributes together. We are materializing these attributes together, so we can preserve the correlations, right? And the both strategies here, I'll talk about how they differ later, but they all do the same number of steps. They divide the query into small parts, and then they divide the population into groups, then adaptively select the best frequency oracle that we talked about earlier, the generalized randomized response and optimized local hashing, right? And then they do some post-processing to improve utility, and then finally answer higher multidimensional queries from associated to the grids. Okay, now I said here divide the population into groups. Let's understand what that means. Because under LDP, if you want to ask multiple questions, multiple queries, or you want to collect different data, right? In our case, grids, you have 2 approaches. You can divide the privacy budget, which is this expression here, right? Or you can divide the user population into disjoint groups, okay? And we show here in Philip that it's better to divide the population into groups, and each group materialize a different grid instead of dividing asking the entire population to materialize all grids and dividing the privacy budget by the number of grids. Okay, so we show that this is true for the generalized response and optimized local hashing. So we follow that approach, and whenever we want the user to report a grid under LDP, we choose the frequency oracle protocol that offers the lower variance. The lower the variance, the higher is the utility. Okay, but how these grids work, right? So we grab an attribute, right? Say the attribute here has a domain 50, and then we use binning, right? We reduce this initial grid from 50 to size 8. And here we can solve the problem of dealing with large domains, because whenever we answering a range query, we have to add the frequency. Let's say the query goes from here to here. We have to add, the counts of these cells in order to answer the query. So by reducing the number of cells, we can solve the problem of large domains, because whenever we adding the counts of a cell under LDP, we're basically adding noise. So each of these cells here is perturbed independently, and whenever you add the frequency of one cell, you're just basically adding noise to the answer, to the final answer of the query. Now, we have two types of grids here in Philip, 1Ds that I've just shown, and we have 2D grids too. So here we have an attribute B with domain equals 50, and here an attribute A with domain equals 100. After the binning, we have this grid, which is much smaller. It's just 5 by 10 instead of 50 by 100. Okay. And each grid, each cell maps 2D subinterval. Now, one important thing is how we determine the size of these grids. There's a trade-off here. If we make these cells, very small, we have a fine granularity grid. We have a lot of error due to noises, since when we're gonna answer a query, there will be a lot of cells within this query rectangle, right? So we're gonna have to add a lot of counts, and we will be adding noise. Now, if the grid is too coarse, that will lead to error too, due to biases. So you must find an optimized size that it's not too granular, but it's not too coarse, right? And the way that we determine the size of the grids is that we estimate what's the error when answering this query rectangle here, a query using a 2D grid. And 1D too, it's the same thing. So here we identify the noise error, the sampling, and the non-uniformity. The noise error is due to LDP. We must add noise to satisfy LDP. So each cell carries noise. Sampling, since we divided the population into groups, the distribution of the group may not be the same as the overall population. So we have sampling error too. And non-uniformity, as we can see, there are some certain cells that may intersect. The query rectangle may intersect some cells, right? So in this case here, we must assume that the distribution within each cell is uniform, right? We have no other option. And we must account for this error too. So accounting for all three, we come up with this expression here. So if we sum all the sources of error, this is the non-uniformity error. This is the sampling error with the noisy error. So if we sum them two, we come up with the error of estimating a query using a numerical 1D grid, using the optimized local hashing protocol and the GRR protocol, right? For category 1D grids, we do not we don't do any binning, obviously, since this is important to answer queries with point constraints with high utility. And then this is the expression for numerical grids, 2D numerical grids for both protocols. And unimportant here, we have two sizes, right? We have the size of the of each dimension. We have two dimensions here. So we take the partial derivative always with respect to Lx and Ly, which determines the size of each dimension of a 2D grid. And here just the expression for the category into the numerical grids. And finally for categorical 2D grids. Okay, now we already know how to what grids to collect. We know how they work, how to calculate their sizes, right? We estimate the error and then take the partial derivative with respect to the size of the grid. And then suppose that we have this user here with this multidimensional row data, right? So it will, given a grid that has been allocated to him, right, which is a grid of an AB grid, he would map his answer to a specific cell, right, and mark 1 day. And then he would perturb this grid to satisfy LDP, right? So if the algorithm, you know, one of the results might be this grid here, which is basically a line giving some noise, right? Okay, now with each user reporting their specific grids, the aggregator can consolidate, estimate the frequency of each cell, right, using the phi algorithm that I showed earlier, right? So this is an example here of the materialized AB grid. And then he can answer queries here, you know. And an important thing is that one of our approaches, they just use this exact grid, which is binned, right? You see here, it's just 5 by 10, for instance. And it just assumes the, you know, that the uniformity data distribution within each cell. Now, we found that if we actually combine a 2D grid, a materialized 2D grid with their respective 1Ds, we can build this response matrix, which each cell is has a unit size, and we can answer queries with high utility using this approach here. We minimize the impact of the non-uniformity error, right? This is binned, this is not binned, right? So this is another approach we call optimized hybrid grids. The previous one was optimized uniform grids. Okay, now we're gonna do the post-processing. The post-processing, we remove negative estimations, which is pretty common when using these frequency oracle protocols, and we make them, the grids, consistent. This is the process of removing negative estimations and correcting the estimations of the positive ones. And the second step is making them consistent. So this is an important step. We have here 1D grid of the attribute A, and here an AB grid, a 2D grid. So these two grids, they are both estimating the attribute A, right? So the regions in blue here, they are basically estimating the range of the attribute A from 0 to 9, right? So we must make these regions sum up to the same value. So this is what we call consistency, right? And we do that in order to achieve better utility. And finally, once we have the materialized grids after post-processing, we can split a multidimensional query into associate queries and estimate those the multidimensional queries from these 2D associated answers, which is a common approach. Okay, now present the PrivMDC approach. The PrivMDC, now we want to tackle the problem. So the problem with Philip and some other baselines is that it assumes that every attribute is correlated. So that this is a problem because we have to materialize a lot of grids, right? A lot of grids, we have to split the population into many groups, and the utility gets diminished, right? So here in PrivMDC, we propose to build a correlation model. And also we assume here that users have different privacy requirements. Some users belong to the DP group, and some users belong to the LDP group. So they do not trust the central curator. And also we investigate here in PrivMDC how we can incorporate prior knowledge, right, of the workload to improve utility. Okay, so this is the overview of PrivMDC. What you see here in green are all the baselines that I just talked about, including Philip, right? Now, the PrivMDC, we add these modules, right? So this is the module. This is the module of building correlations, which is the output of that will be used to smart select what grids we want to materialize, since not every attribute is correlated, right? And there are certain groups of attributes correlated. And we have a module here that analyzes the workload that will serve as input to optimize the user distribution. So if you allocate more users to one specific grid, that grid will have higher utility, more precise estimations, right? So the first step here is to build a correlation model of PrivMDC. We use the data of the DP users to do that, and we propose to construct a B-degree Bayesian network that can utilize an algorithm, an epsilon differential private method called greedy Bayes to build this network. And with this network, which I show an example here of the output, it basically means it shows every attribute in the data set and their parent nodes. This, what basically means here is that the distribution of this attribute depends on these. Actually, there's on one parent, but here we have two, right? So the distribution of this attribute is affected by the distribution of these two. So this is the output of the Bayesian network. And then what we can do with the network together with the workload analyzer. So the workload analyzer will capture what's the weight that is given our workload, which is basically a weight associated to each dimension. We'll estimate, we'll calculate the weight of each dimension. That is how often that dimension is queried. And we'll also may take the average selectivity of the dimension, although this second point here is not required. So here the data analyst can provide some input, right, to maximize utility by telling PrivMDC, these different weights. And we use them in a smart way. I'll show in a bit. So the grid filtering selection will basically use the Bayesian network to determine exactly what grids to materialize. And here we generalize the definition of grids to be k-dimensional. So every other baseline uses 2D grids and 1Ds. We propose to use KD dimensional grids, because using KD dimensional grids, we can map any group of correlated attributes, be that 4 attributes, 6, and so on, any number. And finally, we filter grids that are not used during query answering. This is possible due to the prior knowledge of the workload. Again, and the next step is to determine the size of these grids. Now, one important note is that we have 1D grids, which we borrow the size definition from Philip. And the size of 2D grids we also borrow from Philip. And you may ask, what about the size of the grids that are 3D, 4D, and so on? We just make them, we format them to have the same number of cells as the 1D grids. And the intuition of that is that we want to keep the same noise to signal ratio per grid cell. Okay, now we reach the point of how we can distribute the users among these different grids, these different KD grids, right? So we estimate all the sources of error when answering a query using LDP. Here in PrevMDC, the DP group is only used to build the correlation model. That's their only task, right? So all queries I answered using LDP, these KD grids, using the KD grids. So to optimize the user distribution, we basically identify all the sources of error when answering the workload. And remember that each grid is involved in a number of grids, a number of queries. And here we have the variances for both protocols. And this maps all the error of a K dimensional query. And here we map the optimization problem, the allocation of users within these groups, these joint groups. We utilize the weight of each grid, which was calculated by the workload analyzer, and we multiply it by the variance of that grid, and we do that for all grids, right? The intuition here is that we want to allocate more users to those grids that have higher weights, that is, they are used more frequently in the query answering process. And we have this effect here. So the baselines, they assume that every grid is equally important. So this is the allocation of users to each grid. So each grid gets a low number of, relatively low number of users. That limits the utility. Now in PrevMDC, we by optimize the user distribution, the more important grids that are frequently used in the query answering process, there's a higher concentration of users. So that leads to better utility. The grids that are not very frequently used, they receive a small number of users. And then we do also the construction of the response grid, since this method has been shown in Philip to be better. So we combine KD grids with their respective 1Ds to build the response matrices, right? There's an important effect here after removing the negative estimations and making them consistent, which is the same concept as Philip. We can answer a multidimensional query by using these higher dimensional grids instead of breaking down the query answering process into every 2D combination, right? So this leads to better utility. When combining these different estimations here, there's additional error. And finally, we propose the DPAE, which is an adaptive estimator. Here, the assumptions are that we have users, population with heterogeneous privacy needs, we have the DP group and LDP group, but different from PrevMDC, here we will use the DP group to also answer queries, not only building that correlation model, okay? This is not trivial, however. As we talked about in the background, there are certain advantages to the DP model and disadvantages to, and here we propose to leverage the best of both worlds, right? So we know that LDP algorithm tends to introduce more noise because you have to guarantee privacy locally. Under central DP, we can answer so many queries before the privacy budget is exhausted, right? To this point, we cannot answer any more queries. However, on the LDP, we can answer an unbounded number of queries, which is the case of PrevMDC and Filho, right? But here we want to answer a limited number of queries. That's important, okay? There's a few challenges here, which is how we can improve utility and achieve scalability. On the LDP, we need the correlation model. So the DP group will be allocated 2 tasks, build the correlation model and do the query answering. And the LDP group will basically answer queries too. So we have this DP estimator, and we also have the LDP estimator. We can answer queries using both of these groups, right? Now, we introduce the DPAE estimator, which is this adaptive estimator, on top of the PrevMDC framework that I showed earlier, that big picture. And we add this additional box here, which concentrates on the answering process, the answering query process, okay? So all the rest is basically works as PrevMDC. So the overview of adaptive estimator is that the first subset of queries is, say that we have to answer Q queries, right? This is the query answering timeline, right? So our intuition is that if we answer the first query using DP, we can achieve high utility since DP introduce less noise. However, since we have a limited privacy budget, there's a point where DP it's not good anymore. It's gonna return a lot of error because we are answering a lot of queries. And then from this point on, we switch to use the LDP estimator, which has has higher error than LDP, but it's better. In the case you want to answer a lot of queries, like an unbounded number. But here we have a fixed number, okay? Fixed number of queries. And to find this crossover point, it's not trivial. Because if we choose it too small, these first queries using DP, it's going to be very good, very accurate. However, most of the queries will be answered using the LDP estimator, which has a higher noise. So that will limit the overall utility of all queries. Now, if you use a large CP crossover point, probably the error per query here will be maybe even higher than answering one query using LDP, because the privacy budget will have to be split into many partitions, right? Remember that the lower the epsilon, the worse the utility. So we propose to optimize finding this CP point, and to do that, we study the expected error of each estimator. Again, the DP group is tasked with building the correlation model and answering queries. And the error of the DP of our DP estimator is this one. There's the sampling error, since we're going to be using a small disjoint group, small subgroup to estimate the answer of an entire population. So there's the sampling error, and there's the DP noise error. This is due to the in our case the Laplace mechanism, which adds noise drawn for the Laplace distribution to satisfy differential privacy. So this is the variance of the Laplace distribution. Again, we have to divide that epsilon, the privacy budget, among all of those queries. So this is the final expression of the error. Since we do not have access to the distribution of the entire population, we cannot quantify the sampling error. So we map the estimation, the error of the DP estimator by using the noise introduced by the Laplace mechanism. The LDP group will be responsible only for answering queries, right? And the DP group has this. This is the source of the errors when answering a query. This is the overall expected error when answering a query using the DP estimator. So we can formalize the optimization problem to find CP. So here we want to answer using DP a certain number of queries, initial number of queries. And after that, we're going to switch to the LDP estimator and ask the remainder number of limited queries. Okay. And we run this optimization problem to determine CP. Okay. Now let's talk about the results that we got. We're going to talk about the results of the three approaches. The metric, unless stated otherwise, we use always the mean absolute error. We use that metric because all of the baselines, they use this metric. So we just we borrow that metric. So we use 4 different real data sets and some synthetic too. This is the data sets. They all have different number of correlations, number of users, domains. So we can experiment with different applications. So here we see the results of FELIP first. Here in blue, this is an uniform data set with the query having 2 dimensions and 4 dimensions here. We see that the blue line here, which is the uniform grid, is better because it assumes that data are distributed uniformly within each cell. Or other proposed approach, which is the hybrid grids, it performs good, but not it comes in second. And here we have HIO. It's important to remember here that the workload contains queries with point and range constraints, right? And HIO is the only one that supports both of these constraints. That's why we compare only with HIO here. This is for the normal data sets. Again, another synthetic data set. Here, the hybrid approach is better, which is our approach. The yellow is the baseline. Here's the, for IPUM's data set, the lone data set here. Again, the red, which is our hybrid grid, which combines 2D grids with respective 1Ds, are better. And finally, here we experiment with, so we can see the difference of the, so we propose using the adaptive frequency oracle protocol. So the yellow here is our approach using the adaptive protocol. The blue here is our strategy using a fixed only one protocol, which is the same that the baseline in green uses. So we can see that using the adaptive protocol for grids that we proposed is actually, we can achieve even higher utility. Same thing here for different data sets. And then we present the results for PrivMDC. In PrivMDC, we compare it to FELIP and the other baselines, right? So in PrivMDC here, we remember that we build a correlation model to achieve scalability. And you can see the results of PrivMDC in blue, right? It achieves the best results here in the adult and B5 datasets. I forgot to mention, but here in the x-axis, we increasing the epsilon, that is the privacy budget. Remember that the higher the epsilon, the better is the utility. Less noise is introduced. Okay, now here for all the other two data sets, again, PrivMDC performs the best. This is a data set containing 12 attributes. This is the mean execution time, so very nice. PrivMDC takes the worst case here of the long data set, 67 seconds on average, so not too bad. This is the experiment where we disable the correlation identification model. Since the baselines do not capture, do not build correlation model, we disable our correlation model feature so we can compare more directly. But we can still see that PrivMDC performs the best here in blue. However, for data sets with a small number of attributes, the other baselines may be better options. So here in the y-axis, we're increasing the number of attributes. So we can see that PrivMDC, the more attributes the data set has, the larger is our gains, right? Here, the other two data sets, again, the blue line is better, especially for larger number of attributes. This experiment here, you may ask, okay, what if the distribution of the LDP group differs from the DP group? How PrivMDC performs? So we come up with we sampled the DP group using different levels of KL divergence. So we have 3 levels of divergence, right, between the LDP and the DP groups. And we can see here in the experiments that the best line here is the pink one. This is when the divergence is 0. So the DP group is sampled uniformly at random from the LDP group. Now, when I start increasing the divergence, we have a higher degree of error. However, even for the high setting, that is high divergence, we're still very competitive. We're in line with the best competitor, with the best baseline. So we support, PrivMDC support the distributions within these 2 groups to be different to some extent. Okay, even the worst case here, we're still very competitive. Here's just for the other baselines when varying the epsilon. Another important result is when we increase the size of the DP group with more users in the DP group, the correlation model is more accurate. Okay. And here finally we experiment our adaptive estimator. Remember the adaptive estimator, we want to answer a fixed number of queries. So here for the adult data set, we want to answer 200 queries. For the B5, we want to answer 800. So here we experiment with different approaches, different CP points. Remember that CP has to be optimized, right? It cannot be too small, which is the case of the pink curve here, but it cannot be too large, as the case of the green one. Now, here our baseline is this blue line. This blue line is the performance of answering all queries using LDP, right? The LDP estimator alone, right? The other curves, they combine the DP and the LDP estimator, right? You can see that they are better, right? Here we show the normalized cumulative error, okay, when answer all these queries. So we can see that if we use a small crossover point, the first queries have a very low error, but then after the crossover point, we have to rely on the DP estimator. So the error grows very fast, right? So our goal here is to find the curve that has the lower area under the curve, right? That's the one that has lower error. So the orange one here is the optimized approach, right? So we determined CP like I've shown earlier, right? So the orange approach here tends to be the best one. Now, this is the evaluation of determining CP. This is for other data set. Again, fixed number of queries. Again, the orange, it tends to be the one with the smallest area under the curve. And finally, our final experiment here, we vary the privacy budget. Now we compare our adaptive estimator with PrivMDC, with Philip, and the other baselines, right? And we see that the DPAE approach, which is the adaptive, is the best one. It's shown in blue. PrivMDC comes in second, which is shown here in orange. Okay, again, this is answering a fixed number of queries. So DPAE can indeed plan how to answer fixed number of queries better than the other approaches. Okay, now we conclude our work. We confirm our hypothesis indeed using grids. It's an effective way of capturing multidimensional data and materializing them. We can answer multidimensional private queries. Moreover, we answered our questions. The first one, we proposed Philip to construct and process grids that will support queries with range and point constraints with high utility and answer an unbounded number of queries. The second question we answered by proposing PrivMDC, which leverages the DP group to build a correlation model so we can capture, so we can materialize less grids and optimize using the distribution of users using the workload knowledge and answer an unbounded number of queries. And finally, if you have the case where you want to answer a finite number of queries, a limited number of queries, we propose the adaptive estimator, which optimizes and leverages both DP and LDP estimators to capture the best of both worlds. We identify some Alpro problems too. So dynamic decomposition is one of them. Grids that adapt to the data. It's one of them. Support streaming of data. It's another open problem here. And automate the privacy budget allocation among query answering correlation model. This was done by our DPAE approach, just splitting the privacy budget in half. And these are our publications. Also, there we have an accepted paper. Hang on. And we also submitting next week, probably PrivMDC to ACM TOPS, and next month we're submitting DPAE to PVLDB. Thank you so very much, and sorry for the time.
All right, okay, thank you, Serafim, for your presentation. Okay, so what is it? Right on? Ready here? Over here?
Sorry, do you want me to ask first question? Yeah.
Just give me a moment.
Okay.
Okay, so all right, just give me a moment. Divesh. So I was talking and I was not talking in the microphone, so you didn't hear me. All right, so let's start with the questions. And of course, Jivesh, uh, you're part of the work, so I'm not going to start with you, right? So I'm going to start with Eber. Eber Arcolesi, thank you again. And then we go to Cesar Lincoln, and then to Victor, and finally to Jivesh, right? We go in that order. Eber, please. Yes, please.
So thank you so much once again for inviting me to the jury, Javan and Serafim. So one of the typical questions we always receive in a thesis jury is like, among your own contributions, which one are you most proud of, or which one you defend?
Tough question. I think they are an evolution, right? So the three approaches that
Serafim, do you mind repeating the question? I couldn't hear it fully.
Yes. So one of the typical questions we normally do in a jury's thesis is, what is the contribution that Serafim is the most proud of? Because he proposed three differing in trust models, etc. But what is the one that he really defends or is most proud of?
Okay, so I think we started with Philip and we developed until the PAE, but they are an evolution. So I think there's a good size, a good body of contributions within each strategy, and I'm very happy with the results that we got. So it's tough to choose one, but I'll back them up, equally, I guess.
Okay. Also, one of the questions I had was, what were the conclusions from the naive Bayes attack you had? I don't know if you presented, I think not, but what was the conclusion from the attack part of the work?
Right. Yeah, I didn't add here because there were too much results for the time constraint. However, the naive Bayes attack, we simulate the attack where there's an attacker which has some side information, and it takes control of it has access to the LDP reports of these grids, right? And what we found is that the attacker learns, basically the most frequent value always. So it doesn't learn much.
So it means it's not attackable because it's close to a random guess?
Yeah, it just picks the most frequent value and uses that as as a prediction for the sensitive attribute.
Okay. Also, and do you know why is that? Why is the method already not vulnerable to the attacks?
Right. That's one of the reasons, because with the LDP reports, you have these grids, but they're noisy, right? So even if you have like all the attributes but one, you cannot learn much, right? So because it's already protected on the LDP, it's hard to train a model that will guess with high accuracy this sensitive attribute.
And this was more on like attribute inference attack?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
And for the future work, what do you think is the most urgent or impactful research
Right. I think the streaming setting is very interesting and is one that we plan to study with more carefully moving forward. Since we, in each, if we have new data coming in, and we can typically maintain this data for a limited time window. So the DPAE strategy, which focuses on a limited number of queries, would maybe work very nicely for each window. So I think we plan to investigate that one, prioritize that one, I should say.
Okay. Also talking about the DPAE, one thing I didn't understand, you have a limited number of queries to do in your system, and every time a query comes, you can classify this is a 1D, 2D.
Very, very good. I agree.
I think I had also another question about the Philip. It works, the grid is more for numerical attributes, right?
It's numerical and categorical attributes.
But the grids for categorical, it seemed to be the same domain?
No. The size of the grids are of each dimension is exactly the domain of each categorical attribute.
Yeah, so it means that there is no
there's no
grid.
binning. Yeah.
So it only works, it will mainly work when we have numerical attributes. For a data set that only has categorical attributes, how does Philip compare to other?
Right. To HIO, I think it would probably be better since HIO uses a similar sort of way to do the decomposition. However, the utility, the difference would be not, as big as we obtain here.
Okay. And for the PLIV MDC, which module contributes more to the utility gain? Because I remember in the thesis you made some ablation studies, remove your own module or other, but which one is the most important? Is it the correlation based? Is it the optimization of the number of users?
I think it depends on some scenarios, but I think the correlation identification is one of probably the most important one. Since with that, that result, it's going to impact all the other steps, basically. Yeah.
Okay. I think in slide, when you presented that, for the KL divergency, I didn't get the difference between the default and the uniform one. What does it mean?
Right. So
it's slide 98.
Yes, this one here. No. So
98, no? Yeah, it's this one, sorry.
Yeah, so the default configuration here is the one that I used throughout all experiments. So the DP and LDP groups, they differ to this degree here.
Is it because you didn't sample uniformly at random?
Yeah, I didn't. I classified, I use k-means to find these clusters, and then I sampled from these clusters that were more distant to the mean, so I could achieve a higher divergence, right? So I basically run a lot of different configurations to try to find a high number, and then I modify the algorithm to sample in a way that would achieve like half the mid, would achieve like half the divergence of the high configuration, and then the default is basically half of that. Approximately, right?
But is the default what you use it for the other experiments, or?
Yeah, for all experiments, it was used the default approach, the default configuration. However, in these experiments, we compared all of them, including the one that we sample uniformly at random, which approximately has KR dimensions 0.
Okay, thanks. Another question I didn't got is, why do we need the consistency step after normalization?
Right.
Because the normalization is you are transforming to 0 and transforming to a probability distribution. And then why is there this inconsistency?
Right. So after removing the negative estimations, we may have inconsistency, right? Because the removal of negative estimation will basically make every negative estimation 0, and all the positive ones we want to make them equal to, if we sum all of them, we want to make them equal to 1, right? All the frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
So after this step, we do not have consistency among different grids. We have a sort of a consistency among, within a specific grid, right? Each grid. But after removing negative estimation, we still have this scenario here, this one here, where these different grids, which do not have negative estimations anymore, they're estimating, for instance, the attribute A 2 times here. And if we sum up these frequencies, we have a different estimation. So we associate this grid a weight, and that other grid another weight. And the more accurate the grid is, the higher is the weight. So we took the average, the weighted average, and then we use that value to correct the estimations of each cell.
Yeah, I got it. I'm sorry, this was a stupid question.
Oh, it's important to note that this step may introduce negative estimations. Yeah. So we remove the negative estimations again after we do this.
Also, since you are treating like the different trust models in DP and LDP, can't you go for approximate differential privacy? And if yes, what would be the most utility gain you see?
For approximate differential privacy, we haven't studied that setting. We only studied the differential privacy, the normal definition, say, the non-relaxed definition, and LDP. So we only have the estimations. We only map the error, the expected error of those two estimators.
Because
actually, you're saying that
we didn't investigate it. Yeah.
Because one of the interesting things, because there are like many queries that can be done. If you use the Gaussian mechanism and approximate DP, you have a much better bounds for answering that. And you also have approximate LDP, like approximate GRR and approximate optimal local hashing. So maybe it would make sense as well, or not, but in the future, like to think the same system, but just in a approximate differential privacy setting, where you could also consider the shuffle DP for local DP, and you have a single, not a hybrid, people from DP and LDP, but also you can say the whole system is epsilon delta DP coming with Gaussian mechanism and approximate LDP.
Right. This is an interesting future work.
And
very nice.
I think that's all for me. I have made a few comments for the manuscript, but thank you so much. The presentation was very clear and very didactic.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Like, you're gonna send us the PDF, right, with the annotation. Thank you, Professor Cesar Lincoln. You have the microphone.
Hello, and thank you again, Javan, Serafim, for the invitation for this thesis defense. It was a great presentation. Maybe it should be a little bit shorter, but with more than 100 slides, it's quite difficult to fit everything on time. So I have just some few questions here, some few comments about the document. I shall say first that you write very well. I can see that your first chapter, your introduction chapter, it was like perfect, like a very well done introduction about the main themes. And I like a lot like how you stated the problem statement. You have your main hypothesis, your research questions, and you already define the main concepts that you're dealing with, DP, LDP, and how does it matter, and you put some nice examples. Your first chapter is like very clear. I will probably use this one, at least the general format, to teach my own students. I guess it's a very nice introduction chapter. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
I think it's a very elegant format, and with respect to the other chapters, I have some silly suggestions that you'll probably not take it, but it's just a matter, like Ebba said, that you have like three main contributions, and at some point is difficult to follow what's the point of each one, and if and how they can compare it with each other.
Right.
And I know that you have this sequence because it's a long PhD. You have this like first Philip and first the second, first the third, and I have a few questions here that I will try to pinpoint, and but at least in terms of the document, it would be better. You don't need to change it at all, but it would be better to simply make the chapter for each contribution to be self-contained.
Right.
So you have the problem, the related work, the proposed solution, the experiments, and the discussion all within the same chapter. And then you go, so I have another problem. And then you go again, the problem, the related work, the proposed solution, the experiments, discussion, done. But I have a third problem, and everything goes again. I think it would be a little bit better to follow and make the chapters self-contained, so Javan can take one chapter and pass to a student,
Right.
and everything is there.
Yeah, it makes
Well,
sense.
I can say that we hesitated in doing that.
Yeah.
We talked about it. We made that choice. Well, maybe it was not the best.
It's just
as
a
we hear now.
yeah.
But we had to choose.
Yeah. There is this problem where you're trying to present the fundamentals of Bayesian networks and KL divergence, and you only talk about that like 3 chapters from now. So it's a little bit weird, but of course you don't need to change this, but it's just a matter of a general recommendation. But it works very well when you have a thesis like yours, when you have like 2, 3, 4 main proposals.
Right.
But it's great. The document is very elegant, very, very nicely done. Unfortunately, you have many reference problems, like broken links in the references, some references that do not have years.
Yeah,
the publication year, I don't know
those.
about that, but it's easy to fix. Let's see. Probably because some of those contributions that you have, maybe Philip and maybe they are like a little bit older, and I noticed that the related work sections are also a little bit older. Like you have some lots of sections where you have like 4 or 5 years with no works at all. Like the newest is like 2021 or 2020, and I noticed that maybe you wrote that part 2-3 years ago, and maybe it deserved to be updated.
Okay.
But it's just a matter of trying to put a few more references. I have a few questions here about some slides, so you can please put in the slide 27. You have more than 100, so it's it's a long way. So here I have this quick question. Is just because you're teaching us that the variance of the value is very important to be the lowest as possible.
Right.
And you mentioned that you don't want to divide the privacy budget by M groups because you don't want to do this.
Yeah, I don't want to do this.
So if you don't want to do this, so why this expression is true? Because if this expression is true, the variance that is resulted when you do this is actually smaller. So maybe it would be better for you. So you're actually choosing to follow the first term, right?
Yeah, so this one is the best one. Actually, I think this is
This is swapped, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
Because
This-
if this is true, you should follow the second one.
Right, yeah. This is dividing epsilon. Dividing epsilon, I'm actually dividing the users, and here I'm dividing users. I'm dividing by the epsilon. So it is indeed swapped. Yeah.
Or maybe it's just a matter of greater than 0, lower than 0, or something like this.
Yeah, I got this. This one minus this one
should be lower than 0.
It's supposed to be negative. Yeah.
Okay.
This one is always greater than this one.
Great. Yeah. Perfect.
I messed up here, but in the Philip paper, it is correct.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm not going to be taking
So let's go to slide 51.
51. I think it's faster here.
Okay, so I have this question, like maybe it's a problem of conception or of misconception of my part, but when you state that Prive MDC enables reducing the noise level for these high utility dimensions, so analysts can achieve more accurate aggregate insights. So when you say that, is like you have this flexible privacy for some dimensions and not for others? How exactly you're being like you're reducing the noise level? Reducing the noise level for us is like less privacy in general. So when you're choosing to reduce the noise level for some dimensions, the more useful ones, the more frequently used ones, you're actually say that you're willing to have less privacy for those dimensions.
Right. This is a good option. I mean, a good question. So remember that we choose to divide the population instead of dividing the privacy budget. So under LDP, every user in the population is going to report using the same privacy budget. So they all have the same privacy level, right? So the thing here that PrivMDC does is that allocating more users to a specific grid will make that grid more accurate, because if we go back to the error estimation, you see that if I have a lot of users, the variance will be lower, right? So the more users we allocate to a specific grid, the higher is the utility, even though every user in the population is guaranteed epsilon
the
local
same
differential
epsilon
privacy.
Okay, nice. So maybe this is the same answer for a related question, because if you come back a few slides in the grid itself, previous one where you have all the counts.
I think it's like this
yes,
one?
this one. So let's say that we have that cell with the number 6 and this cell with the number like 105.
Okay. Yeah, these two.
Yeah. So you can have a few queries where they appear together, right?
Right.
And so the people who are in this 6 cell, they are guaranteed to have the same privacy of the other cell, which have many more users.
Yes. because remember that each user here basically use the same protocol, like the same algorithm as the same privacy budget, right? So there are some users that are going to report their true value. Some users are going to lie, right? But when you aggregate, when you combine all of the reports, you get this grid here, right?
Okay. Because you aggregate everything together, right?
Yeah, exactly. So here we have 6 users, but some of those they may actually be there, be from there. Maybe those are just noise,
Yeah.
like false, values, and we cannot tell the for certain. That's why you have the
That's the noisy part.
yeah. So we have plausible deniability.
Nice. So I had a question about unlimited versus limited queries that I already mentioned, because at some point you state that unlimited number of queries is GP and LGP is limited number of queries, but sometimes you like mix those things. But I guess I already understood that it's a matter of a setup. It's not a matter of choosing which algorithm you're going to use, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's a matter of setting.
Right. Yeah. So with DP, you can answer a lot of queries, but you have to split the privacy budget. I mean, that's one way I talked about that in the introduction. The other way under DP, where you can answer an unbounded number of queries, you can train a model and then just ask this model to sample a tuple, and then you can answer an unbounded number of queries. But that approach introduces higher noise.
The utility goes down.
Yeah. So that's why I use the first approach, where it divides the privacy budget. Why I divide, between only those first subset of queries, so I can achieve better utility.
Perfect. So let's go to the slide 96.
96.
Writing the results. Let's see. So actually I have 2 questions here, because the first one is related to the metric, because you use most of the time the mean absolute error.
Yes.
But your queries are related to the count between some intervals.
Yeah.
So
Count queries with range constraints. Yeah.
And when you have anything like those very low numbers are actually saying that you have like less than one integer of error in your queries.
Right. So the mean absolute error here is of the frequency, right? So it's not
the count.
It's not the count. It's the frequency of the value.
This answers my second question. So this is not actually absolute error; it's relative error.
Right. It's the absolute error of the frequency, right? So
also known as relative error.
Right. Yeah, it's just I'm accustomed to the to this expression here. So we have the true frequency, the estimated frequency, and here we divide by the number of queries we answered,
because it's an average. But
right,
please you come back to the tables.
Sure. That's why the values in the y-axis
are quite small, right?
Yeah. This one here.
So yeah, so this is related to the number of attributes, right? This case here.
We increase the number of attributes.
That's the number of attributes participating in the query.
Right. It's the number of attributes in a data set. So the
data set that participate in the query, because
you can say that too. Yeah.
Because I wonder if this the right side of those plots, if they are usual, because I see that the error becomes quite large, like a lot larger.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know about the utility of that right side of the plot. Like I see, of course, that Private MDC it's much better than the other ones, especially HDG. But I wonder if it's actually useful. Like you can use it in practice.
Right.
If you're dealing with a 0.41 relative error. I was just
Yes.
wondering if this is the level of error that we are okay with it, that we can deal with it.
Right. So our goal here was to, you know, see how this curves, how the error grows as we increase the number of attributes. Since more attributes mean more grids, since and implies dividing the population to a larger number of groups. But the point, I think the main point here is that our curve, grows, is lower than the other one, the baselines.
Yes.
So, and we compared, we took the baselines, they state of the art. So we actually implemented PrivNud, which is the most recent ones, and I'm not sure about if the utility, but we show that we improve, the state of the art. So
I guess we have two questions. So another question comes from why did you compare, in most experiments you compare two or even three of your proposals, but it seems that they should be used in different settings, if I understood correctly.
Right. Yeah. So Philip, for instance, has different assumptions than
Yes.
PrivMDC and DPAE. But we, for instance, in PrivMDC, we try to make some experiments like more fair, where for this one, we disabled the correlation identification model. So now PrivMDC is basically materialized the exact same number of grids as the baselines, right? So we try to, introduce the novelty of our work, but also compare like more directly, assuming like same scenario that the baselines,
Because it's just a matter of like really highlighting in which use cases, which method should be used.
Right.
And like this one has a few assumptions, and those assumptions are valid in those settings. For those other ones, this is not really the case, so we should use this other one.
Right.
So maybe it will be a little bit better to separate the experiments.
Right. I see.
And the last question is actually something that I noticed that you did not report the overhead, the computational overhead. So like when you're doing this, those privacy processes on demand, when you're receiving the queries, do you have like a significant overhead over the competitors?
Right. We do have in terms of execution time. For instance, PrivMDC, it takes more time than baselines, but we, even for the loan data set, which has 2.2 million of users. Actually, this is not the slide. We can run it in 67 seconds. So even though it takes more time, but it's not too bad, I guess.
So the other competitor is like how many seconds?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I don't have the values.
Yeah,
but we can.
Like
I can certainly take some
half
average and add them.
Half this time.
No, not half. It's more like 80% of that.
Okay.
So we add like
Okay.
20% more
Okay.
time.
No, okay, okay.
Yeah.
It's comparable. It's okay. Nicely done. Like
you.
a tour de force, the 4 years, 5 years PhD.
6.
6. Nobody concludes the PhD in 4 years anymore.
Right. Yeah, no,
So 6 year.
the results that we did not
Yeah.
4 years.
Nicely done. It's a very well written document, well presented paper, presentation, and I hope you have many more papers to come. I know that you want to pursue a postdoc here in LSBD, so I'm sure that Javan is receiving you very well. So, yeah,
Thank you.
congrats.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Cesar. All right, so we go to Victor. Please, your comments and questions.
Thanks, Javan. So, thanks for the invitation to be here. Also, it's nice to be with you guys in the committee with Divesh, Cesar, and Abba. So, Serafim, thanks for the presentation. It was great. So, I've been discussing with you some part of your work, mostly on the Private MDC. So I've seen all those ideas of Private MDC coming, gradually, progressively, and we do not understand what's the level of contribution until you see like all your contributions in one document, in one whole document, and you see what the extent of contribution you had during those 6 years, and it's great, right? It's really nice to see that, and I appreciate that. I congratulate you that,
Thank you.
because
Thank you very
yeah,
much.
it's a beautiful work. I have to say that,
Thank you.
right? And my comments are mostly questions. I also have some recommendations, some suggestions here. So, the first thing that I'm going to ask you is the same question I asked you in our qualification, because you're having problem with this over and over. So, even the last submission for VLDB. So, have you thought, and found a compelling real use case for this work? Because that's been the most problematic part of the work, because technically it's great, right? But it's really difficult to sell, right? So from the last submissions and from our last discussions, have you have any new thought about what use cases can you put here to make it compelling and convincing to reviewers that your work can be deployed in real systems? So do you have any new thought about that?
Right. This is a good point. The use case of each strategy, FALEP, PrivMDC, and DPAE. So we have a submission almost ready to go up. The paper of PrivMDC almost ready to go, and there we improved a lot, like the use case and the motivation, actually using real world use case, like the Firefox, for instance. It and Apple too. It relies on beta test users to test their software, improve before releasing to the global population. So these beta tests are a small group that trusts Apple, that trusts Firefox. So that would be the DP group, and then the release software version that everybody uses. That would be the LDP group. So we're improved a lot the motivation, like actually explaining and citing directly where Firefox mentioned that in their website, Apple, and so on. So we can have a more compelling, motivation, and we can actually deploy this to no reward situation. So I think we improved a lot.
Yeah, that's great. We can also discuss that. So if I have any ideas, I can also share with you. Yeah, because we have been having problems with that. Just okay. So going on, just a minor thing in the introduction. Actually, throughout the text, just define what is the DP user and LDP user. That's it's easy for us who are um, um, specialists on the matter, but for someone who is not from a privacy domain, cannot link those heterogeneity of privacy preferences to DP and LDP users.
Right, I'll
That's a minor
improve
thing.
that.
Yeah. Also, one thing that is really important in your, I think was something that Cesar was mentioning, is that to have all the assumptions really clear and what is being solved to be really clear in each one of the approaches. For instance, first thing I would do is also to put, it's just also a minor thing in the table that you compare your baselines with our
Right.
with our three approaches. Also put a column that says if you solve the problem for limited or unlimited queries.
Right.
Yeah, just a new column there. And also make it clear, I don't know where, because all of the three approaches, they solve the the same big problem, of course,
Yeah.
but with slightly different flavors, slightly different exceptions. And for example, solving for a limited query is pretty much different for solving with unlimited query. They are different problems, even they are mostly the same, but this little thing make them different.
Right.
So given that, for example, the graph that you compare DPAE with all the other ones, right, by the end of the presentation. So yeah, there's one. So one question I have is, so is it really a apples to apples comparison in the sense that you limit the number of queries, and it is good for DPAE because it's limited, and it is good for it. But all the other, they suppose that it is unlimited, and from if so they have different assumptions. They solve slightly different problems, right?
Right.
So is it an apple to apple comparison, or also a good answer for you to give is okay? So it's the best you can do because there's no other approach that uses limited queries. So is it the best comparison, or could we have a better comparison than that with, like, I don't know, other approaches that also suffer limited queries?
Right. For multidimensional analysis, this is the best baselines we can get in order to get closer to this set of assumptions, limited number of queries, and possibly heterogeneous privacy requirements. So these are the best, the ones that gets closer to these assumptions, right? So there was no way that, we had no option like to modify the baselines in order to like leverage like this limited number of queries. Also, it's important to note that since we have a population with DP and LDP users, the baselines, they have more. We convert the DP users to LDP users,
Okay.
right? So, for instance, the baselines have more LDP users than Previm DC, for instance. So they, even though they have more users answering queries, than PrivMDC, but PrivMDC still performs better with less users, to answer queries.
Okay, there's something I said that I don't know that is actually true, but PrivNud and HDG, they are also for unlimited queries.
Unlimited,
Okay,
yeah.
So that is true. Okay, no problem. Okay, so another thing that I was just curious is on the PrivMDC approach. So given your Bayesian network, after training, so given the estimated Bayesian network, you do like a graph analysis that to get the clicks.
Yeah.
And one question is that so clicks, they are mostly, but not only, but mostly used in undirected graphs. And Bayesian network is a directed, right?
Right.
So your click assume for a moment that that graph is directed, undirected, or it's a click in the strict sense that you find for and you search for clicks that really have the edge in the two directions.
No, we actually we do not require to find a click in this. Maybe click is not the best way to put it, but basically here we want to materialize, to find these groups of attributes where we materialize an attribute and its parents together, right? And then there's some cases where you have so naturally you have groups with more attributes and less attributes.
Okay, so the grid actually is so you have in this case you will have like 6 grids or more than that.
No, this is just the output of the Bayesian network. Within that, I'll find all the all the links, all the attributes that are together. They may be like the children or
parent.
Yeah,
or
parent.
parent.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I mentioned. Probably what you're doing is okay. So let's assume that is directed for a moment, right? So the direction is not important, so forget about the direction and find the click in that graph.
Right. Yeah. Okay. It's basically what I do.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. Great. Okay. One great thing about your work, I think, which is much better than the qualification, is you have now introduction with motivation for each one. That is great, right? So we understand what it does and how it does in overview of how it does, and before reading the details, that is great. One minor thing also in DPAE, you start saying that it's adaptive, and it's the first time I was reading about DPAE, so I was really curious why it is adapted. It took me a long time to read through the text to find why is it adaptive.
Right.
I didn't know until I got to the adaptive pages later to the adaptive estimators. Okay. So here's why is it adaptive.
Right.
So you advertise that it's adaptive. So say why it is.
Start using the LDP estimator. So if we execute more queries, all of these lines will converge to this one.
Okay.
So if you go to infinite, like the difference, the area under the curve, it's gonna be, the difference is gonna be smaller among these different strategies, right?
Okay. Good.
That's why we focus on a limited number of queries, the use case of a limited number of queries.
For this, for the DPAE, it makes a lot of sense to be limited. So, of course, this is an input, the number of queries.
Right.
And And I would also discard the hypothesis since the blue one has no correlation model and the other have, right?
Now, the blue one in this experiment, it has correlation
So
model.
it has.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to discard the hypothesis of since it has a correlation model and the others also, but the others use less budget to build the correlation model, right?
Right. Exactly.
So actually, to the infinite, they could be worse.
They can be worse. Yeah, that's right.
That's a that's a nice
Yeah.
exercise to think
Right.
about.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, and just one last question, as a future work. So just to ask if you have something in mind for the future work you mentioned about the dynamic workload. So do you have anything, an idea in mind for that?
Not yet. We haven't discussed in depth the change in workload and the streaming setting. Which DPA might be a really good use case. So we're still to investigate that in more depth.
Okay, that's great. So thanks, Serafim, for answering the questions. So thanks, Jaban, also. Divesh, too bad you couldn't be here. So, I rescheduled my vacation so I could be in the weekend with you, but we can talk a little bit here.
Already, so we'll have to do that some other time.
Right. Yes. We're going to do it. All right, Divesh, it's your turn, please.
Okay. I guess most questions that have already been asked, right, by very good group of people in your committee. So I will echo some of the points that I think you've done very good research for your thesis. Right? I think it's well written, and now that we have better motivations, this is great. So let me ask you a few questions which sort of may go slightly outside what you've considered for your thesis so far, right? But it's something that is part of how we think of it.
Right.
So there's sort of a historical connection between not in a privacy setting, but let's say in a regular setting, in a regular database setting, between answering multidimensional range queries, right, and doing multidimensional indexing of a data set.
Right.
Right. And in the literature on multidimensional indexing, there are a lot of index structures people have proposed, KD trees, R trees, and so on. One very interesting direction, which is more theoretical, right, and you may be familiar with it as maybe other members of the committee, is to say, is to use something called as space filling curves in high dimensions and multiple dimensions. Are you familiar with space filling curves?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the Hilbert curve.
Yeah, perfect. So you can think of Hilbert curves, but there's a family of such curves. There's Hilbert curves, there's onion curves, and so on. But
Right.
the basic idea is to fill the curve, and that allows you to map a multi-dimensional space into a one-dimensional space, or at least some lower dimensional space, right?
Right.
So one question is, if you sort of use some kind of space filling curve and translate sort of a multi-dimensional space into one-dimensional space, then if you ask a multi-dimensional range query, right, on the original space, it translates effectively into a union of one-dimensional range queries in the transformed space.
Right.
Right. Now, in the indexing world, you can actually show that if your metric is for indexing, is for instance the number of disk reads, right, or the number of sort of independent, not consecutive discrete, often this one-dimensional version is more efficient because you're doing sequential reads as opposed to random reads.
Right.
Do you have a sense that whether these kinds of space-filling curves can be useful in the multidimensional range query answering setting, right? Because if you sort of answer queries using an interval, right, then you make errors only at the two extreme points of the interval, as opposed to every point where you could potentially cut the multidimensional space because of the gridding that you do.
Right.
My question is, any thoughts about sort of using multidimensional approaches like the one you explore in your thesis versus an alternative approach that might use space-filling curves and a union of one-dimensional range queries on the space-filling curves?
Right. I think it's a good point for investigation. The thing that I worry about is that whenever you take this multidimensional space and you put it and you map it to one dimension space, such as the Hilbert curve, this one dimensional space may be very, very large. So we have to, under LDP, whenever you have this very big domain, there's a problem, right? So we would have to find a good way to like compress sort of use Binio or some other type of decomposition in order to make it in order to achieve better utility. But that's certainly a good problem to investigate. I haven't seen in the literature works that under LDP that leverages Hilbert curve, for instance, these curves. So that's definitely I would actually add that there's a future work.
So I think my comment was sort of it's part of what I see the value of a PhD thesis. Of course, the single biggest value is to help you get a PhD Serafim, right?
Right.
But the next value is for the PhD thesis to serve as an inspiration to the next generation of PhD researchers.
Right.
Right.
Right? You're going to read the thesis, they're going to say, okay, these are great ways to solve a problem. I can learn from this. But if you identify interesting open problems or future directions for the next generation of PhD students, then they can think about interesting problems in that space too.
Right.
So maybe adding something along these lines in a future work section might be, and part of it could be also your intuitions about what might work and what might not work.
Right. Yeah, I'll definitely add that. It's a good contribution.
I mean, one of the reasons why there is a potential it might work, right, is that if you think about something like the Hilbert curve, it tries to make sure that points that are close to each other in the high dimensional space are part or are close to each other in the Hilbert curve.
Right.
Right. And very often in multi-dimensional space, one of the things that people often assume, and this is commonly done when you do things like imputation and so on, is that points that are close to each other in the multidimensional space also have similar values.
Right. Yeah.
So it might be interesting to see not if the points are completely random and independent, but if you have some kind of property like that.
Right.
Right. Then, do these kind of Hilbert curves and so on, do they provide a competitive alternative as well?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Now, I can see more potential now in the investigating this problem. It's a good point.
Let me ask a question sort of in the same spirit about PRIV MDC, right? So You mentioned, I think correctly, that when you identify grids where you, based on the workload, you want more accuracy, you assign more users to that grid.
Yeah, right.
But a fundamental assumption there is that each user, right, is independent of each other.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
why you can reduce the variance if you have a larger number of users according to the formula that you have.
Right.
What happens sort of in a model where not all the users are necessarily independent of each other, right? Under some trust models, maybe some users might collude with each other, or they might be correlated to each other because they're looking at similar kinds of, or they have similar kinds of behavior.
Right.
In which case, assignment of users to individual grids, right, may itself need to be done in a more careful way, right? Because if you assign a large number of highly correlated users to a particular grid cell, it's a little bit like having a smaller number of effective independent users.
Right.
So do you have any thoughts on, and I'm putting this in context. If you think of the DP model, right,
Yeah.
the centralized DP, right, the assumption was that analysts might not be trusted, and they might want to sort of figure out some private values for individual users.
Right.
The data, right? That's why you had a trusted aggregator, but you provided private anonymized values, noisy values to the analyst.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't trust the aggregator, right, then you can start thinking about LDP.
Yes.
What do you do if you don't trust that all the users are truly independent of each other and they might collude?
Right. This is an interesting scenario. I haven't to be honest, I haven't done much reading on that assumption, on works that use that assumption. That would certainly be a point where we could modify the grid allocation among users in order to circumvent that, the possibility of users colluding. That's a very interesting problem. Yeah, I don't know if I can, on top of the head here, have more thoughts on that.
Something to think about for the future. I mean, you have a long career ahead of you, Serafim, too.
Right.
And at least initially, a normal path is to build on your PhD work while you try and discover independent directions of your own.
Right.
And looking at these kind of problems and what has been done and why is this, and what is the motivation for this?
Right.
Is again something interesting to look at.
Yep. I agree.
Yes, one more question, and it's connected to one of the things you mentioned, right? You talked about data streaming.
Yeah.
Right? But I want to sort of go back to a more fundamental reason why something like that might be interesting. Is basically that, things change over time.
Yeah.
Right? Everything in the world changes over time, right? So if you ask questions, let's say in the stock market, what is the average value of this, of the stock market contribution of the MAG 7 to the total, stock market? That changes over time.
Yep.
Right? Maybe the data arrives in a streaming fashion, right? In a streaming fashion, you might say there is a timestamp where something new appears, but you might be interested in questions over different ranges of time. But even in a simpler model where you don't necessarily keep track of things over time, but it's just updated. So you still have you only care about the latest results,
Right.
right? But everything might, sort of get updated over time. Right? It's a simpler model than thinking of streaming.
Right.
Right. So how do you expect to deal with scenarios where, for instance, because of these updates, the correlations might change over time, right? And the answers to the range queries might change over time.
Right.
Do you have any sense how much more complex does this make the problem?
Right. Yeah, I mean, if we forget about like historical data and we focus on each window, I think that's it's a scenario where we could, apply, for instance, DPAE with, more directly. But we could maybe even use old information for like just, things may not change like data may not change like suddenly, so they progress in small bits, so maybe you can, look into that, like instead of building a total new correlation model, maybe we could just adjust the current one that we have, in order to not spend so much, privacy budget or, allocated users.
What
Divesh, could you just repeat again, because the internet connection
my
got.
comment was, would it will change and how to think about things more incrementally.
It's just that the internet connection is a little bit unstable right now. I couldn't understand your comment. Just a second, Divesh. Tá na minha bancada, sabe onde é a minha bancada? Tá naquela bolsa. Divesh, do you hear me well now?
I can hear you well.
Okay, could you repeat what you were saying, please?
Don't worry, Serafim. Nothing critical. I was just adding to the previous comment a little bit.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I think that I'll end my questions, but I'd like to congratulate you on the nice presentation. But for everybody's benefit, I'd like to mention that Serafim presented about 100 slides, but if you look at the collection of his notes over the last 2 years, they probably are about 1,000 slides. So it was a careful selection.
Right.
He just had just a little bit less than Felipe. Right.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank
Divesh.
you, Divesh.
Appreciate it.
Listening to all those nice questions Divesh just did, that reminds me of the questions the quick questions he does in every meeting that we have all over these years every week, and that driven me to a question, Serafim, that I wanted to to do. There is still some of PhD candidates in the room, and some students too. You're here for already a couple of years, so could you tell them what were the choices that you made all over these years that were good, that you feel like added to your research, and what were the choices that you didn't do? I mean, you didn't make the steps that you didn't follow, that they should not also not do it in their work.
Right. I think
The good things and the bad things
right.
in
I
these.
think the most important thing that I've learned was to listen to people. Listen to Divesh, listen to Professor Javan, listen to Professor Lincoln, to Abby, to Professor Victor, because every time they have a question, and it's it is important. Take note, like, of every question people ask. Take note, because there's probably a contribution there. There's probably an improvement to be made, and that's gonna improve a lot. It's gonna make your job a lot easier to write and to develop your contributions and so on. So I think listen and take note. It's the most important thing.
And just a little bit, I think it is the same for every comment that we had from the reviewers.
Right.
Right? Maybe it's the same feeling.
Yeah, the same feeling, exactly. Yeah, listen closely to what reviewers say. Take them seriously, right? Maybe you think, oh, that's just naive. He didn't read the work, but he actually did, but he couldn't comprehend the way you present it. So, take notes and improve on that. I think it's the best advice I could give. And one thing that I did that did not work so well, there were a lot, but it's hard to pinpoint right now. But I don't know. It's just, I think it's really important. I mean, seriously, it's really important to, like, find a way to balance, like, the research and your academic life in general, so you can progress in a more flowy manner than just having, like, times where you're too focused but you get exhausted and then you produce nothing. So I think having a balanced approach of doing research every week, making take a do a little take a little baby steps. I think it's the best. And